I'm Sophia Martinez, 26, and tonight was supposed to be the most romantic evening of our relationship. Instead, it became the night I discovered who my boyfriend really was, thanks to 6 months of secret Italian lessons that were meant to be a surprise. Marco and I had been together for almost a year, and I'd fallen hard for this charming Italian-American architect who swept me off my feet with his confidence and sophistication. When we met at a gallery opening in downtown Chicago, he was everything I thought I wanted: successful, worldly, and devastatingly handsome, with those dark eyes and that accent that appeared whenever he spoke to his family. From the beginning, I knew his Italian heritage was important to him. He'd grown up speaking both languages at home, thanks to his immigrant grandparents who lived with his family. I loved watching him light up during phone calls with his nana, switching effortlessly between English and rapid Italian that sounded like music to my ears. The problem was I understood none of it. 3 months into our relationship, during a dinner with his family, I sat smiling politely while his relatives conversed in animated Italian around the table. His mother would occasionally translate something for me with a tight smile, but I felt like an outsider looking in. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I found Isabella, an Italian tutor, through the community college where I worked as an admissions counselor. 3 times a week during my lunch breaks, I'd meet with her to learn the language that meant so much to Marco. I practiced with Italian podcasts during my commute, watched Italian films with subtitles, and even started thinking in basic Italian phrases. "It's such a beautiful gift you're giving him," Isabella would say during our sessions. "He'll be so touched that you learned his language." The secrecy was exhausting. I had to cancel evening plans with excuses about work projects, decline weekend activities claiming I was behind on household tasks. But I was determined to surprise Marco on our 1-year anniversary with fluent Italian conversation. As our anniversary approached, Marco suggested we celebrate at Castello, the upscale Italian restaurant where we'd had our 3rd date. It seemed perfect, intimate, romantic, and the ideal setting to reveal my linguistic surprise. I spent hours getting ready that evening, choosing a black dress that hugged my curves perfectly, styling my dark hair in soft waves, and applying makeup that enhanced my natural features. Looking in the mirror, I felt beautiful and confident, ready to surprise the man I loved. But when I arrived at Castello, Marco wasn't alone. Sitting at our table were his business partner Antonio and Antonio's girlfriend Elena, along with another couple I barely knew. My intimate anniversary dinner had become a group celebration without my knowledge. "Hope you don't mind the company," Marco said, kissing my cheek. Antonio closed a huge deal today, and it seemed perfect to celebrate together. I forced a smile while disappointment crashed through me. The Italian reveal I'd planned now seemed impossible in this crowded setting. Still, I settled in, hoping we might have a moment alone later. The evening started pleasantly enough. Marco was attentive during the first course, asking about my day and keeping his hand on mine. But as the wine flowed and the main courses arrived, the dynamic shifted. Marco's attention drifted increasingly toward Antonio and the other men at the table, their conversation dominated by business talk and sports. Then, about an hour into dinner, it happened. Marco turned to Antonio and switched to Italian, assuming I wouldn't understand.
"Questa serata non finisce mai. Marco seguita slaita ai roll. Sofia è così bisognosa stasera."
This evening never ends. Sophia is being so needy tonight. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, heart suddenly pounding. I maintained my pleasant expression while my stomach dropped. After 6 months of intensive study, I understood every word. Antonio glanced uncomfortably at me before responding quietly in Italian.
"Non essere duro con lei. È il vostro anniversario."
"Don't be harsh with her. It's your anniversary." Marco snorted softly.
"Un anno è abbastanza. Guarda quel vestito, troppo stretto per il suo tipo di corpo. Non credi che stia cercando troppo?"
1 year is enough. Look at that dress, too tight for her body type. Don't you think she's trying too hard? The words hit me like physical blows. I took a deliberate sip of wine, forcing myself to appear calm while screaming internally. 6 months of dedicated study had prepared me for a romantic surprise, not this devastating betrayal. Non direi questo, Antonio muttered uncomfortably.
Sta bene.
I wouldn't say that. She looks good. Marco continued, ignoring Antonio's discomfort.
Dovresti vedere la ragazza che mi ha mostrato una casa la settimana scorsa. Una vera bellezza italiana, capelli neri lunghi, curve perfette. Non come le ragazze americane che mangiano solo insalate e sembrano ancora grasse.
You should see the girl who showed me a house last week. A true Italian beauty, long black hair, perfect curves. Not like American girls who eat only salads and still look fat. My hand trembled slightly as I placed my wine glass down. The Italian phrases I'd carefully practiced were now serving a different purpose, allowing me to understand each cutting insult. My anniversary gift had become a window into Marco's true character.
Anche lei parla italiano, Marco continued. Non dovrei spiegare la mia cultura come faccio con Sofia. È così semplice con il suo noioso lavoro universitario.
She speaks Italian too. I wouldn't have to explain my culture like I do with Sofia. She's so basic with her boring college job. Antonio shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting the conversation to end.
Penso che dovresti smettere, amico.
I think you should stop, friend. But Marco leaned closer, his voice slightly slurred from wine.
Sai cosa? Sto progettando di lasciare dopo le nostre vacanze il mese prossimo. Ho già prenotato camere separate all'hotel.
You know what? I'm planning to leave her after our vacation next month. I already booked separate rooms at the hotel. Heat flooded my body, followed by cold numbness. Marco wasn't just mocking my appearance. He was planning our breakup while simultaneously planning a vacation under false pretenses. I thought about the trip to Tuscany we discussed, how excited I'd been to visit Italy with him, maybe even practice my Italian with locals.
Perché?
Antonio asked uncomfortably.
Why? La sua famiglia è così noiosa, Marco replied casually. Suo padre è un idraulico e sua madre è un insegnante. Così comune. Mia madre aveva ragione su di lei.
Her family is so boring. Her father is a plumber and her mother is a teacher. So common. My mother was right about her. The insult to my family, my kind, hard-working parents who had welcomed Marco warmly into their modest home, ignited something beyond hurt. Anger began replacing shock, strengthening rather than weakening me.
E quella bionda al tavolo vicino alla finestra?
Marco nodded toward another diner.
Più il mio tipo. Scommetto che non parla di strategie di marketing durante la cena.
And that blonde at the table by the window?
More my type.
I bet she doesn't talk about marketing strategies during dinner. Sei ubriaco, Antonio said firmly.
Dovresti smettere.
You're drunk. You should stop. But Marco chuckled.
Lei non sospetta nemmeno. Così fiduciosa, così facile da ingannare.
She doesn't even suspect. So trusting, so easy to fool. Something shifted inside me at those words. The hurt transformed into cold, clear purpose. While Marco continued his Italian commentary, unaware that every word revealed his true character, I made my decision. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to prepare for what would come next. In the elegant bathroom, I stared at my reflection, seeing the sophisticated girlfriend Marco had shaped me to be. But internally, I was transforming into someone stronger. When I returned to the table, Marco was still deep in conversation with Antonio about a real estate deal. I waited for the right moment, then casually addressed our server in perfect Italian.
Mi scusi, potrei avere un espresso, per favore?
Excuse me, could I have an espresso, please? The table fell silent. Marco's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips, his face draining of color as understanding dawned. Naturalmente, signorina, the server replied with a smile. Of course, miss. I turned to Elena with a gentle smile.
Vorresti condividere un dolce con me? Il tiramisù qui è spettacolare.
Would you like to share a dessert with me? The tiramisu here is spectacular. Elena's eyes widened in shock. I don't speak Italian, she stammered. Oh, I'm sorry, I replied innocently. I just assumed since Italian is spoken so freely at this table, everyone would understand it. Marco's voice was strained when he spoke. Cassie, I didn't realize you spoke Italian.
Che sorpresa. Anche io parlo italiano, he replied with a tilt of my head.
What a surprise, I speak Italian too. Since when? He asked, attempting casualness while his eyes betrayed panic. Oh, about 6 months now. I've been taking intensive lessons. I wanted to surprise you for our anniversary. I paused, letting that sink in. And I certainly got a surprise in return. I turned to Antonio, speaking in Italian.
Ti è piaciuta la parte in cui Marco ha detto che il mio vestito è troppo stretto, o hai preferito quando ha detto che sta progettando di lasciarmi dopo le nostre vacanze?
Did you enjoy the part where Marco said my dress is too tight, or did you prefer when he said he's planning to leave me after our vacation? Antonio's face flushed red.
Mi dispiace, Sofia. Non ero d'accordo con quello che ha detto.
I'm sorry, Sophia. I didn't agree with what he said. Elena looked confused. What's happening?
What are you talking about?
Oh, just reviewing some charming commentary Marco has been sharing in Italian, I explained calmly. He's been quite descriptive about my physical shortcomings, my boring job, and my common family background. Apparently, he's already booked separate rooms for our vacation, which was planned as our final trip before breaking up. Elena gasped. The other couple at the table shifted uncomfortably. Sophia, you're overreacting, Marco attempted, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. It was just guy talk. Which part was guy talk? I asked, maintaining perfect composure. Comparing me to other women, mocking my family, or planning our breakup while sitting across from me at our anniversary dinner? You're taking everything out of context. I've had a few drinks. Actually, alcohol doesn't create thoughts, Marco. It just removes the filter that prevents you from expressing them. Everything you said revealed your genuine feelings. I stood up, placing my napkin beside my untouched dessert. Our relationship is over. No discussion. You can't be serious, Marco sputtered. Over some comments? Those weren't comments. They were revelations. I removed my credit card. I'll be paying for my portion of the meal. You're being ridiculous, Marco insisted, but his confident facade was crumbling. I paid quickly, adding a generous tip despite the circumstances. As I gathered my purse, I noticed Antonio looking ashamed while Elena stared at Marco with obvious disgust. I wish you well, Marco, I said with finality. But I deserve better than what you offered. Without waiting for his response, I walked toward the exit, my stride purposeful despite the trembling in my knees. The cool Chicago air hit my face as I stepped outside. Instead of calling a rideshare immediately, I decided to walk, needing time to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from Marco that progressed from accusatory to pleading to angry. You're being childish. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. This is why I can't talk to you about serious things.
Fine, be that way.
I was going to break up with you anyway. I didn't mean any of it.
Please call me.
I silenced my phone and continued walking through the city lights, eventually catching a taxi home. Once in my apartment, I methodically collected Marco's belongings, clothes, toiletries, books, his spare key. I worked with quiet efficiency, removing traces of him while mentally cataloging how I would reclaim the space as fully mine. 3 months later, I found myself in a completely transformed life. My apartment now reflected my actual taste rather than Marco's preferences. I'd painted the walls warm colors he'd once dismissed, filled shelves with my books and family photos, and created a space that felt genuinely mine. My Italian lessons continued, but now for my own enrichment. Isabella and I had become genuine friends, our weekly meetings focusing as much on culture and conversation as grammar. The language that had revealed Marco's betrayal now connected me to literature, films, and eventually, a planned solo trip to Italy. Professionally, the energy I'd once spent accommodating Marco now fueled career advancement. My Italian may have started as a surprise for Marco, but it ended up being a gift I gave myself, the ability to understand not just words, but the character of the person speaking them. And that understanding set me free. But my story doesn't end there. The months that followed brought unexpected challenges and revelations that I never could have anticipated. 2 weeks after my encounter with Marco outside the coffee shop, I received an unexpected call from his mother, Francesca. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name on my caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. Sophia, cara, she said in her heavily accented English. I need to speak with you.
Can we meet for coffee?
I was hesitant. Francesca had never been particularly warm toward me during our relationship, often speaking exclusively in Italian during family gatherings and making little effort to include me in conversations. But something in her tone made me agree to meet her at a small cafe in Little Italy. When I arrived, Francesca was already seated at a corner table, looking older than I remembered. Her usually immaculate appearance seemed slightly disheveled, and there was a sadness in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. What did you want to discuss? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Francesca took a deep breath. Antonio told me what happened at the restaurant, about what Marco said in Italian. She paused, studying my face. And that you understood every word. I nodded, unsure where this conversation was heading. I owe you an apology, she continued, her voice heavy with emotion. Not just for that night, but for the entire year you were with my son. I knew how he spoke about you when you weren't around. I knew about his cruel comments, his plans to end things. And I said nothing. The admission hung between us like a confession. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my instincts about being excluded had been correct, and sadness that this woman had watched her son disrespect me without intervention. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Francesca's eyes filled with tears. Because I raised him better than that. His father and I, we immigrated here with nothing but hope and determination. We taught Marco to respect others, to value hard work and kindness. Somewhere along the way, success made him arrogant, made him think he was better than others. She reached across the table and placed her weathered hand over mine. You learning Italian, it was beautiful, Sophia. It showed respect for our culture, for our family. And he mocked it. He mocked you. Her voice broke slightly. I am ashamed of him. And I am ashamed of myself for staying silent. I felt unexpected emotion rising in my throat. Thank you for telling me this, I said quietly. It means more than you know. There's something else, Francesca continued. Marco has been telling people that you were crazy, that you overreacted to innocent comments. He's been painting himself as the victim. She shook her head in disgust. I wanted you to know that his family doesn't support this narrative. His sister Maria, his cousins, they all know the truth. And they're disappointed in him. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Francesca spoke again. Your Italian was excellent that night at the restaurant. Where did you learn? I've been taking lessons with Isabella Rossi, I replied. Francesca's face brightened for the first time. Isabella. She taught my neighbor's daughter. Wonderful teacher. You should continue your studies, Sophia. Don't let Marco's behavior taint something beautiful. As we parted ways that afternoon, Francesca hugged me tightly. You deserved better from my son, she whispered. But more importantly, you knew you deserved better. That takes strength. Her words stayed with me as I continued rebuilding my life. The validation from Marco's own mother helped heal some of the wounds that lingered from feeling like an outsider in his family. It also reinforced my decision to maintain my Italian studies, not despite what had happened, but because of my genuine love for the language and culture. A month later, Isabella surprised me with an invitation to join her extended family for their annual festa in the backyard of her cousin's home in the suburbs. You've become like family to me, she said. And I want you to experience real Italian hospitality. The festa was everything I had imagined and more. 3 generations of Isabella's family gathered around long tables laden with homemade pasta, fresh bread, and wine from their own vineyard back in Tuscany. Children ran between the tables while grandparents told stories in rapid Italian that gradually became easier for me to follow. What struck me most was how different this felt from the formal dinners I'd attended with Marco's family. Here, when someone spoke Italian, they naturally included me, either translating important parts or switching to English to make sure I felt welcome. When I attempted to respond in Italian, they celebrated my efforts rather than correcting my pronunciation with subtle condescension. Sophia speaks Italian beautifully, Isabella announced to the table during dessert. She's been studying for almost 8 months now. Brava, called out Giuseppe. Isabella's uncle. What inspired you to learn our language? I hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. I started learning to surprise someone special to me. That didn't work out as planned, but I discovered I love the language for itself. Ah, said Rosa, Isabella's aunt, with a knowing smile. Sometimes we learn things for the wrong reasons, but end up with the right knowledge. The heart wants what it wants, but the mind keeps what it needs. Her words resonated deeply. I had indeed learned Italian for the wrong reasons initially, but it had become something precious to me independent of Marco. More than that, it had become a symbol of my own capability and determination. As the evening wound down, Giuseppe approached me with a proposal. My nephew Luca owns a tour company in Rome. He's always looking for bilingual guides for American tourists. You should consider spending a summer there, improving your Italian while seeing the country. The idea planted a seed that would grow over the following weeks. A summer in Italy working as a tour guide? It seemed like a dream, but also a practical way to immerse myself in the language while having an adventure I'd never considered possible during my relationship with Marco. When I mentioned the possibility to my parents during our weekly Sunday dinner, their reaction surprised me. "Sweetheart, that sounds wonderful," my mother said, her eyes bright with excitement. "You've seemed so much happier these past few months. More like yourself." My father nodded in agreement. "You were always curious about the world when you were younger. Remember how you used to check out travel books from the library and plan imaginary trips?" I had forgotten about that childhood habit, how I used to spend hours poring over guidebooks, imagining myself exploring distant places. Somewhere during my relationship with Marco, I'd stopped dreaming about adventures that didn't include him. "What about my job?" I asked, though part of me was already imagining myself in Rome. "Talk to Dr. Peterson," my mother suggested, referring to my department head. "Maybe you could arrange a sabbatical or a leave of absence. You've been there for 4 years without taking any significant time off." To my surprise, Dr. Peterson was not only supportive but enthusiastic about the idea. "Professional development comes in many forms," she said. "Managing international students and understanding global perspectives could only enhance your work here. I can arrange for a 6-month leave of absence." Everything seemed to be falling into place, as if the universe was conspiring to support this new direction in my life. But there was one more hurdle I hadn't anticipated. 3 days after submitting my leave of absence paperwork, I received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This is getting ridiculous."
Marco.
He had apparently gotten my number from a mutual acquaintance after I'd blocked his original contact information. The message irritated me not because of any lingering feelings, but because it represented exactly the kind of controlling behavior that had characterized our relationship. I chose not to respond, but Marco persisted. Over the next week, messages came from different numbers. Apparently, he was borrowing phones from friends and colleagues to reach me. "People are talking about what happened at the restaurant. You're making me look bad. I heard you're planning some trip to Italy. This has gone too far." We both said things we didn't mean. "Can't we be adults about this?" The final message was the one that truly revealed his character. "I know you're doing this Italy thing despite me. You never cared about Italian culture until we dated." That message crystallized something important for me. Marco genuinely believed that my interest in Italian culture began and ended with him. He couldn't conceive that I might have developed genuine passion for something independent of our relationship. In his mind, I was incapable of growth or interests that didn't revolve around him. I finally responded with a single message. "Marco, I'm not going to Italy because of you or to spite you. I'm going because I've discovered something I love, and I deserve to pursue it. Please stop contacting me." I then blocked the new numbers and asked my friends to avoid sharing information about my plans with anyone connected to Marco. The weeks leading up to my departure were filled with preparation and excitement. I studied Italian intensively with Isabella, focusing on art history and architectural terms that would be useful for tour guiding. I researched Roman history, practiced describing famous landmarks, and even learned traditional Italian songs that I could share with tour groups. My apartment gradually filled with guidebooks, maps, and phrase books. I'd converted the spare bedroom into a study space, with Italian vocabulary covering the walls and audio lessons playing constantly in the background. The transformation of my living space mirrored the transformation happening within me. One evening, while practicing a presentation about the Colosseum, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Elena, Antonio's girlfriend from that fateful anniversary dinner. I opened the door cautiously. "Hi, Sophia," she said nervously. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I got your address from Isabella. My cousin takes lessons with her too." I invited her in, curious about what had brought her here. "I wanted to thank you," Elena said once we were settled in my living room. "What you did that night at the restaurant, it opened my eyes to things I'd been ignoring in my own relationship." She went on to explain that witnessing my confrontation with Marco had prompted her to pay closer attention to how Antonio spoke about women when he thought she wasn't listening. She'd started noticing patterns of casual disrespect, jokes at her expense, and dismissive comments about her career in social work. "I realized I was making the same excuses you probably made," Elena said. "Telling myself he didn't mean it, that boys will be boys, that I was being too sensitive. But watching you stand up for yourself with such dignity, it made me realize I deserved better too." Elena had ended her relationship with Antonio 2 weeks earlier. Like me, she'd discovered that what she initially interpreted as confidence was actually arrogance, and what she'd seen as protectiveness was actually control. "The crazy thing is," Elena continued, "I feel so much lighter now. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to be the person he wanted me to be." Her words resonated deeply. I remembered the constant mental calculations I'd made during my relationship with Marco, wondering if my outfit was sophisticated enough, if my conversation topics were interesting enough, if my opinions aligned with his social circle's expectations. The exhaustion of constantly performing had lifted gradually over the months since our breakup. "Are you really going to Italy?" Elena asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "In 3 weeks," I confirmed. 6 months in Rome, working as a tour guide. "That's incredible," she said with genuine admiration. "You know, I've always wanted to travel solo, but I was afraid I wasn't brave enough." "I don't think it's about bravery," I replied, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. "I think it's about finally believing you deserve to pursue what makes you happy." After Elena left, I sat in my transformed apartment, looking at the Italian learning materials scattered across every surface. In a few weeks, I would be boarding a plane to Rome, embarking on an adventure that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. The shy, accommodating girlfriend who had learned Italian to please her boyfriend had evolved into someone willing to move across the world to pursue her own dreams. The night before my departure, Isabella threw a small farewell party at her home. Her family, the women from my book club, colleagues from work, and even Elena came to wish me well. As I looked around the room at these people who had supported my growth, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "A toast," called out Giuseppe, Isabella's uncle, raising his wine glass. "To Sophia, who learned our language with love and discovered herself in the process. May Italy welcome you as family." "Salute," the room chorused, and I felt tears of joy rather than sadness. As I boarded the plane to Rome the next morning, I carried with me not just luggage and guidebooks, but a profound sense of possibility. The woman who had sat silently in restaurants while being mocked in a language she wasn't supposed to understand was now fluent enough to guide tours through ancient ruins and Renaissance palaces. The flight gave me hours to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. What had started as a secret project to surprise my boyfriend had become a pathway to self-discovery. The betrayal that had shattered my relationship had ultimately freed me to pursue adventures I never dared to imagine. As the plane descended toward Rome, I looked out the window at the ancient city spread below and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete excitement about my future, unfiltered by anyone else's expectations or limitations. I was Sofia Martinez, 26 years old, fluent in Italian, and ready to write the next chapter of my story in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Marco's cruel words had been intended to diminish me, but instead they had revealed my strength. His mockery of my family had reminded me of the values that truly mattered. His dismissal of my efforts had fueled my determination to succeed. The greatest irony was that Marco had given me exactly what I needed: the clarity to recognize my own worth and the motivation to pursue my dreams without compromise. Sometimes the most painful betrayals become the most valuable gifts, wrapped in lessons we never wanted to learn but desperately needed to understand. As I stepped off the plane into the Roman sunshine, I whispered a phrase Isabella had taught me, Ogni fine è un nuovo inizio. Every ending is a new beginning, and mine was just getting started.